There is a city in East Tennessee that, for 3 years, was not allowed to exist on any map. It had schools, churches, roller rinks, grocery stores, a newspaper. It even had a rolling library. 75,000 people lived and worked inside its fences, and almost none of them knew what they were actually building. This is Oak Ridge, and the story of what happened here, in the hills west of Knoxville, along the bend of the Clinch River, is one of the most consequential and quietly haunting chapters in American history. In the autumn of 1942, the United States Army Corps of Engineers began acquiring land, or more accurately, taking it through eminent domain. Many residents came home to find eviction notices tacked to their doors, giving them as little as 2 weeks to abandon homes their families had owned for generations. Others found out when their children returned from school with a message from the principal: "The government is going to take your property for the war effort." There was no further explanation. Some families, already displaced once by projects of the Tennessee Valley Authority, were forced to move again. In the end, roughly 59,000 acres along the Clinch River were taken, often for less than $50 an acre. What rose in its place would become, in less than 3 years, one of the largest industrial complexes ever built. The project was called the Manhattan Project. The site was called Site X, and the reason they chose this stretch of East Tennessee ridge country was deliberate. General Leslie Groves wanted a location that was remote, far from the coasts, low in population density, and with access to enormous amounts of electricity. The TVA's dams provided that power. The surrounding ridgelines provided natural containment, and the isolation meant that, if something went wrong, the damage might be contained. By 1943, projected population estimates had already climbed to 45,000. By the end of the war, Oak Ridge would be the 5th largest city in Tennessee, a city that did not appear on any map. To build it, the government took unprecedented measures. Copper was desperately needed on the battlefields, so the Army borrowed 14,700 tons of silver, pulled from the bullion vaults at West Point, and wound it into the massive electromagnets needed for uranium production. So strict was the Army's accounting that by the end of the war, less than 36,000% of that silver was unaccounted for. Nearly all of it was returned to the vaults. Across the valley, the secret work was divided among 4 industrial facilities, each separated by ridgelines in case of a catastrophic failure. K-25 enriched uranium through gaseous diffusion. S-50 used liquid thermal diffusion. Y-12 used electromagnetic separation. And X-10 operated as a pilot reactor for plutonium production. The K-25 building alone, a vast U-shaped structure, covered 44 acres. At the time of its completion, it was the largest roofed building in the world. Inside the Y-12 plant, something remarkable was happening. The machines that separated uranium isotopes, called calutrons, required constant, precise human control. At Berkeley, they had been operated by Ph.D. scientists. At Oak Ridge, they were run by young women, many just out of high school. Thousands of them. They watched dials. They adjusted controls. They were told almost nothing about what they were doing. One supervisor told his team, "We can train you how to do what is needed, but cannot tell you what you are doing. I can only tell you that if our enemies beat us to it, God have mercy on us." Letters were censored. Workers who asked too many questions were quickly dismissed. Inside the control rooms, the magnetic fields were so powerful they could tug at tools and pull metal from pockets, even lifting bobby pins from the women's hair. It was strange work in a strange city, for a purpose no one would name. And it was a city deeply divided. While white workers lived in prefabricated homes, thousands of black workers, who cleared the mud, poured the concrete, and did the heaviest labor, were housed in 16 by 16-foot plywood hutments with no plumbing and a single stove, 4 to 6 people to a room. Married couples were forbidden to live together. The hutment compound was fenced and patrolled by guards at all hours, with a strict curfew enforced for women. The army had originally planned to build a proper neighborhood for black residents. It was abandoned as white housing demands grew. Yet, despite the conditions, the workforce was extraordinarily effective. When production data was compared, the young women at the dials consistently outperformed the scientists who had designed the machines. One operator, Gladys Owens, did not learn what she had actually been doing until decades later, when she saw a photograph of herself during a public tour. On August 6, 1945, an atomic bomb detonated over Hiroshima, Japan. The uranium that fueled it had been enriched here, in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. For the first time, many of the people of Oak Ridge learned what they had been building. The secret, finally, was out. There was celebration. There was relief that the war might soon end. And, for some, there was something harder to name. A quiet reckoning with what their work had made possible. The bomb ended the war, but Oak Ridge did not end with it. By 1946, the X-10 reactor had begun producing radioisotopes for use in medicine, agriculture, and research. The site grew into Oak Ridge National Laboratory, one of the world's leading scientific institutions. Work continued through the Cold War: weapons components, reactor research, isotope production. But the wartime urgency had left something behind. Mercury contamination from Y-12 operations spread into the soil and waterways. Uranium and radioactive waste added further complications. In 1989, the Oak Ridge Reservation was placed on the Environmental Protection Agency's National Priorities List. Cleanup efforts continue to this day, a slow, necessary, multi-billion-dollar reckoning with what was left in the ground. And yet, Oak Ridge endures. The graphite reactor still stands. The International Friendship Bell, cast in 1993, marks the 50th anniversary of the project and bears the dates of Pearl Harbor, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and VJ Day. Visitors now walk roads that were once closed to the public, past gatehouses that once kept the world out. What happened here was enormous in every sense. The science, the secrecy, the sacrifice, the consequence. But what stays with you when you walk these ridgelines is how human it all was. Families pushed off their land with no explanation. Young women adjusting dials in magnetized rooms, trusting instructions they could not question. Workers who built and labored and kept a secret they did not fully understand, and who returned each night to a city that did not officially exist. Oak Ridge is called the Atomic City, the Secret City, the city behind a fence. It is all of those things, but it is also, unmistakably, a southern place, built in mud, built fast, built by ordinary people from the hills and small towns of this region, people who did what was asked of them, at a cost that took decades to fully understand.